Welcome to Communication Skills, a community dementia education program of Alzheimer's San Diego. My name is Amy Abrams, and I'm the Director of Education at Alzheimer's San Diego. We're a local nonprofit organization headquartered in the Kearny Mesa area of San Diego and serving all of San Diego County. Our mission is helping families today while we support efforts to find a cure for tomorrow. Here is a look at the agenda for our program today. We'll start by talking about the symptoms of dementia and how they change a person's ability to communicate and their behavior. We'll talk about strategies for having effective conversations, ways of staying connected, and alternative means of communication. We'll talk about responding to behavioral expressions as a form of communication. And finally, we will discuss the variety of resources that are available for ongoing support. So we'll start with a look at the common symptoms of dementia and how they change a person's ability to communicate, their personality, and their behavior. We'll start by defining this word dementia. Dementia is not one specific disease. It's the word that we use to describe a group of symptoms that are caused by an underlying medical condition. That medical condition may be Alzheimer's disease, or it may be one of a number of different types of dementia. So dementia is this group of symptoms caused by an underlying medical condition that impairs more than one cognitive domain and interferes with a person's normal daily function. So some of the cognitive domains that may be impacted, depending upon the type of dementia, are memory, language, the person's ability to focus their attention and concentrate, executive function and problem solving, personality and behavior changes, and changes to a person's visual spatial abilities. Here we'll take a very brief look at the different regions of the brain and the primary functions that they control. Being able to understand the symptoms of dementia for many care partners is a very valuable way of putting communication challenges into context and understanding that when a person is saying something that is incorrect, when they're saying something that makes you feel defensive, for example, when they're in a moment of confusion or disorientation and don't remember or recognize people who are very important in their lives, for example. For many of us as care partners, it can be really helpful to understand and be able to recall ourselves that this communication, this behavior that we're seeing is not something that the person is doing on purpose, that these are symptoms of changes, symptoms of disease in their brain. So Alzheimer's disease and many other types of dementia often begin in the medial temporal regions of the brain, the dark blue region of the brain that you see in the image on the screen. The temporal lobes are primarily responsible for our memory, specifically short-term memory, as well as our language center. When the disease is present in the frontal lobes of the brain, the large region of the brain behind our eyebrows and foreheads, this is the region of the brain that is primarily responsible for our executive function, our ability to take in large amounts of information and decide what to do with it. Sometimes this is referred to as the CEO of the brain. It's the problem solver and the decision maker. Importantly for our discussion today on the topic of communication skills, the frontal lobes are very involved in helping us regulate our behavior. This is sort of the seat of our social filter, if you will. It's also a very important part of the brain that allows us to have empathy for other people, to see a situation from another person's perspective. This is an ability that is impaired in many people with dementia. The parietal lobes, which are the light blue region in the graphic on your screen, are up at the crown of the head, and the parietal lobes are primarily involved in our ability to perceive sensory information. This is the part of our brain that makes sense of what we're smelling, what we're hearing, what we're tasting, and it's involved in a lot of our complicated word and thought formation. The occipital lobes, which are toward the back of the brain, are primarily involved in our vision, but they're also involved in our balance. And then the cerebellum, this region at the back of the brain toward the base of the brain, is highly involved in our bodily movements, our fine motor skill, as well as larger muscle movements, our balance, and our coordination. So all of that is to say that communication changes are symptoms of the person's progressive disease. Communication changes are baffling and they're frustrating, and it's really important that we remember in those moments of frustration that they are not something that the person with dementia has control over. So some of the common symptoms that we'll see are listed here. Difficulty with finding the right words or understanding words that are being spoken or words that are being read. For many people with dementia, there's a significant challenge in connecting something that they are seeing with what it is that they are hearing. For many people with dementia, the visual abilities are stronger than the auditory abilities. So that is to say that often it's easier for us to communicate by providing visual cues rather than simply telling somebody with words that they're listening to what it is that we want them to do. For many people with dementia, it can be difficult to filter out background noise. This could be sounds, but it could be other types of clutter as well. It could be visual clutter, a room that has a lot of stuff in it, or a window that has a lot of activity happening outside. It could be a noisy television or radio program. It could be children or pets running around the room. That is to say, it can be difficult for a person with dementia to focus on a communication when there's a lot of other stuff going on in the background. Frustration when communication becomes challenging is very common for people who are living with dementia. If I'm struggling to make myself heard or understood, often I'm going to, if I'm a person who's living with dementia, I'm going to simply give up in frustration or maybe even become angry with the person who is not understanding what it is that I'm trying to say. When a person with dementia speaks more than one language fluently, we will often see that their primary language, the language that they learned first in life, remains stronger. Those language skills remain intact longer than languages that were learned later in life. So sometimes we will see that a person who's living with dementia, as their communication skills are beginning to decline, what that looks like is a movement in and out of primary and secondary language, which can be very confusing and difficult if their caregiver or care partner does not speak both of those languages. And of course, a very common symptom that we see in most forms of dementia is the repetition of a statement or the repetition of questions. This is a nearly universal symptom, and there are a variety of reasons that a person may be repeating themselves. Most often, we think it's simply a matter of the person not remembering that the statement has already been made or that the question has already been asked. Here we have a very important concept, the concept of anosognosia, a person's insight into memory loss. Our understanding of anosognosia and its relevance in dementia care comes to us through the occupational therapist Teepa Snow, who developed a method called the positive approach to care. You'll see her website here on the screen, www.teepasnow.com, where you can learn more about the positive approach to care. Anosognosia is a word that comes to us from the ancient Greek for without disease knowledge. It's a deficit of self-awareness, a condition wherein a person who has a disability seems unaware of the existence of this disability at all. A simpler word for this is insight. About 50% or so of people who are living with dementia have the condition that we call anosognosia. They are not aware that anything is changing with them. They're not aware that their memory is declining or that they are losing their language or other skills. From the outside, this often looks to us like the person is hiding things or is engaging in the coping mechanism that we call denial. But it's really important to understand that much of the time, it isn't simple denial. It's the person really, truly not having any insight into the changes that are happening to them. About 20% or so of people who are living with dementia are aware of the fact that they may be aware of their diagnosis, and they're certainly aware that things are changing with them. They have a sense that they're losing their memory. They have a sense that they're losing some of these skills and ability. And their response to that is to feel very controlling. That sense that, well, if everyone around me would sort of stay out of my business and let me do this the way I'm comfortable doing it, stop trying to help me, just stay out of my business. If I could control my environment more thoroughly, then I would be just fine. So we call this category, this is a person who is aware, they have insight into their memory loss, and their reaction to it is one of control. And then finally, the remaining 30% or so of people who are living with dementia, again, they have insight into the changes that are happening with them, and their response to this is to feel very anxious. These are individuals who might appear needy. They may worry about their care partners when they are out of view for long or even short periods of time. They have an awareness that their memory is declining and they need other people. They need to rely on other people for assistance that they didn't need before. So if we are aware of where the person that we care for falls within these three different categories of awareness or insight into one's own skill loss, then we can set realistic goals for how we're going to try to communicate with them. If a person is not aware that they are losing their memory or losing these skills, our goal in our communications is to change their attitude toward the type of assistance that we're trying to provide to them, rather than trying to convince this person that they need our help. We want to change the way they think about our help. So we want to try to avoid arguing with them and drawing attention to the person's deficits, remembering again that they are lacking in insight. They are not able to see the changes that they're experiencing. For those who fall into that category of aware and controlling, our goal is to stay connected. We don't want to point out or try to step in and fix when they're doing something wrong. We're trying to provide assistance, but in sort of a quiet way. And for those who are aware of their changing abilities and are feeling anxious about this, our goal is to provide lots of reassurance, to build a team and reassure the person that I'm here for you. With these individuals, we want to be gentle. We want to keep the person's sense of value, what gives them meaning in their day, what makes them feel that they have a sense of purpose, what skills do they still have. We want to keep these things in mind for everybody, but especially with these individuals. We'll go through some examples of what this might look like. So one of the difficult realities we have to face when we care for a person who is living with a progressive form of dementia, like Alzheimer's disease, is that these relationships are changing. Again, they cannot change what is happening in their brain. So we are the ones that need to adapt and think about different ways that we can change the way we're responding to what's happening with them. I also want to remind you that you are both changing. Not only the person who's living with dementia is changing, but you as a care partner are changing as well. Both regular changes that anybody would be experiencing over time, but also as a consequence of being a care partner. You're under stress, you're worrying, your sleep habits may be affected. There's a variety of ways that you're changing as well. And all of that, of course, has consequences. Your relationship, whatever family or friendship relationship you have with this individual, the nature of that is certainly changing. So a lot has changed. There's no doubt about that. But what hasn't changed? So I want to encourage you to take a moment and reflect on this question. How is the person that you care for, how are they still the same? What are some things that they love that they've always loved? What are some activities that they enjoy? What's something that they're still good at? Can you think about some things that they need now that they've always needed? Reflect on this for a moment. Keep those responses in mind, and we'll be coming back to this in a little bit. Now we're going to talk about some strategies for conversation, connection, and other nonverbal ways of communicating. It's very important to remember that communication is far more than just the language that we use. I'm intensely aware of this right now as I'm delivering a webinar and don't have anyone to look at. You cannot see my tone, my facial expressions, my posture, the different ways that I use body language or movement, right? We are lacking in this platform, the ability to gauge each other's behavior, our mood, the unspoken messages that we're sending beyond just the words that we're saying. But I like to point this out nonetheless to remind us all that communication is far more than just the words that we say, and you innately have the ability to read all of these aspects of the person that you care for as they are communicating. And they have some ability to continue to read these things about you. We have these skills inherently. So a few guidelines on how to connect effectively before we start a verbal communication with a person who is living with the symptoms of dementia. First, do what you can to be in a good physical position whenever possible. Of course, we're talking primarily here about when you're having face-to-face interactions. Many of these guidelines are different when you are communicating by phone or by video chat, for example. But when you're having a face-to-face communication, maintain good eye contact and be in a comfortable, supportive physical position. Meaning if they are sitting down, then it can be effective for you to sit down next to them in a position that does not feel too close or too confrontational. If they're lying down, maybe pull up a chair and sit next to them rather than standing over them at the bedside or next to the couch, for example. So making good eye contact, being within their field of vision, recognizing that it may be narrower than it used to be, and offering some kind of an introduction, saying something like, "Hi, Mom, it's me, Amy." Right? This is a way that we are giving the person an opportunity to figure out who we are, what our relationship is to them, and what it is that we might be doing there. Sometimes this introduction is not necessary, but it can be sort of an easy kindness that we can offer to someone who might be feeling a little bit disoriented, recognizing your face as a familiar person, but not quite able to put their finger on exactly who you are. Pay attention to your tone of voice, the volume with which you are speaking, the types of hand gestures that you're using, right? So that your tone and your body language sort of match and feel comfortable to the person in the environment or the type of communication that you're having. We never want to rush through anything really that we're attempting to do with a person who's living with dementia. When we feel rushed and flustered, pressed for time, we feel agitated and we communicate that agitation. So allow yourself plenty of time for a communication or a conversation, recognizing that everything we do needs to be just slowed down a little bit. And finally, consider some ways that you might be able to connect and communicate with this person using other senses, using other tools besides language. We're going to return to this topic shortly. So here we have an overview of some communication techniques that may be helpful. Using short, clear, and very direct speech can be very helpful. Simplifying your language, but also simplifying instructions and limiting choices may be really helpful, rather than asking a broad question such as, "What would you like for lunch?" We might consider simplifying the instructions that we're giving that person or limiting the number of choices. Would you like a tuna sandwich or would you like some soup? Simplifying and reducing the type and amount of choices that a person needs to make can be very useful. Repetition, I talked about as being a symptom of dementia, but it can also be a very helpful communication strategy with people who are living with dementia. It may be very helpful for them to hear a statement or a question again. If they don't respond to a question that you've asked, it can be really helpful to repeat your question exactly the same way. This is a very difficult habit to cultivate, but it is a skill that we can learn. Learning to not add more information the second time you ask the question, to not reframe the question and ask it a different way, but simply repeat it exactly the same way. Often we're going to have a little undercurrent of irritation or impatience in our voice when we are repeating ourselves for the second or third time. So I encourage you to keep that in check. Maybe take a deep breath before you repeat the question, and keep in mind what your tone sounds like as you're repeating that question or that statement. remembering that for the person who's living with dementia, it may feel to them like the first time that you've made that statement or made that request. Very important that we address a person who's living with dementia directly, not talking around them at doctor's appointments, for example. We always want to assume, regardless of where a person is in the disease process, that they can hear what we're talking about and that they can understand. This is one of the foundational principles in providing dignified care to a person who's living with dementia. And on a related topic, very important to avoid using tone or terminology that sounds like baby talk with a fully grown adult, or a speech pattern that is sometimes referred to as elder speak, where we refer to older adults as honey or dear or sweetie, for example, if that's not a term of endearment that we always used with that person. Try not to argue, to correct someone when they've got the facts wrong, to say something like, "Don't you remember, we just talked about this a few minutes ago." It is not usually helpful to remind a person with dementia that they forgot about something. If they lack insight into their memory loss, they may not remember that that conversation happened, and your attempt to jog their memory will be met with frustration. Or if they do have insight and you do remind them that they have forgotten something, often this just produces feelings of anger and frustration with themselves. So do your best not to say things like, "Remember, we just talked about this," or other ways of reminding the person that they forgot something, or questioning or quizzing their recent memory about things. This final point is a really hard one, but it's a very important one. As best you can, try not to take these frustrating communications personally. When somebody is saying something that is patently false, that is making you feel defensive about something that you didn't do or that you did do, again, these are not things that the person with dementia is doing on purpose. So it's really important that we think again about the image of that diseased brain. Remember that these are symptoms of their disease process and not take these things personally. Instead, we can try using more positive language, framing our statements and requests in a positive way. Instead of telling someone what you don't want them to do, say, "Please do this," rather than "Don't do that." As best we can, maintaining a spirit of kindness, of generosity, and forgiveness, both toward the person who's living with dementia, remembering that these are symptoms of their disease, but also toward oneself. Right? There are certainly going to be moments you're going to get these things wrong. You're going to react in a moment of frustration, in a moment of fatigue, and you won't always communicate perfectly and kindly. So maintain that spirit of kindness and forgiveness with yourself as well. And very importantly, remember that kindness is often more important in our interactions than full honesty. Right? For example, if you have a person with dementia who has lost their driving privileges and they fall into that category of anosognosia, they don't recall that they are experiencing memory loss or losing these skills. When the person with dementia asks you, "Well, where is the car?" They're looking in their garage, they're looking in the driveway, and wondering where the car is. In a moment of confusion, disorientation, not remembering that they no longer have driving privileges, an honest reaction, an honest answer would be, "Well, remember, The last time we went to the doctor, he said that you were no longer safe to drive, you've lost your driving privileges, and we sold your car. That's the honest answer. In that moment, however, if this is a person who lacks insight, who does not remember that doctor's appointment, who is not aware that they are losing skills, that information is not going to be met with acceptance and understanding. It's going to cause more confusion, probably agitation, and probably anger. A kinder response in that moment may be what we call a therapeutic fiblet, a little white lie that is told with good intentions, right? Keeping the peace, allowing the person to feel in control and good about their day, rather than causing that anger and agitation and frustration. So instead, in that moment, a kind thing to say may be something like, oh, the neighbor's car broke down and they're borrowing it for a few weeks. Kindness, in many cases, can be more important than honesty. This is a difficult technique for many care partners to employ, but we do encourage you to keep the person's dignity and calm top of mind. So what this all really comes down to is learning how to focus on a person's feelings, not the facts. We should strive to pay less attention to the words that are being said and pay more attention to the emotion that's being expressed. Yes, this person may be saying things that are factually incorrect, but a person's feelings are never wrong. So when we acknowledge this, we're employing a technique that's called validation. So validation is the recognition or affirmation that a person or the feelings that they are expressing are worthwhile. Other terms that we use to describe validation are agreement, reassurance, understanding, and empathy. Let's see what validation might look like in a conversation or an interaction with someone who's experiencing memory loss or confusion. So you've just put down the plate of chicken in front of the person that you care for, and you hear, "I don't want to eat this. I hate chicken." A typical, and by the way, completely normal reaction might be something like, "But you told me you wanted chicken." "No, forget it. I'm not making anything else." But let's look past the person's words here, the "I hate chicken" and "I don't want to eat this." Let's try to understand what this person is really saying. Maybe they're used to having more control over decisions about what they eat. Perhaps they're used to being the person that does the cooking or the meal preparation themselves. Or what if they're just not feeling well today, and instead of being in touch with that feeling, they're rejecting the specific food? So what is your agenda here in this interaction? You're determined you're not going to make something else, but we don't necessarily need to tell them that. So how might you respond in a way that's more validating, that lets the person know that you've heard what it is that they're saying? A response that might be more validating would be something like, "I'm so sorry. I totally forgot. I was in such a rush, and I guess it just totally slipped my mind. Let me go see what else we have available." And then maybe leave the room and try again a few minutes later, right? We don't have to get into an argument about whether or not the person likes chicken, whether or not the person asked for chicken. If we simply apologize, acknowledge what they've said, and try again later, we'll probably be a lot more successful. So here, you have arrived at the person's home at the appointed time to take them to an upcoming doctor's appointment. And what you hear is, "You didn't tell me about a doctor's appointment. Forget it. I'm not going." A typical reaction might be, ugh, you've been seeing this doctor every 3 months for years. It's right here on your calendar. I told you I was coming. But again, let's think back to what this person in this clear moment of confusion and disorientation is really saying. When they say, you didn't tell me about a doctor's appointment, I'm not going. How might they be feeling? This to them feels like a piece of new information. I have to get up, I have to get dressed, I have to get out of the house, and I have to go to a doctor's appointment. So again, let's consider, what is your private, unspoken agenda here? It's to get them out of the house. But rather than trying to prove to the person that you did, in fact, tell them about this appointment, and in fact, it's right here, I wrote it on your calendar, how might you respond in a way that's more validating and that acknowledges how they might be feeling? Maybe something like, oh my goodness, did I forget to tell you about this appointment? I'm really sorry about that. But you know what? We've got plenty of time before we need to go. Let's go find something comfortable to wear, and we'll go for a walk at the beach afterward. So validation at its core is all about finding opportunities to say more yes and less no. We'll talk now about responding to what we call behavioral expressions, which are a form of communication. The word behavior has very negative connotations, but really it just refers to something that is an out of character response for that person, saying or doing something that they probably would not have said or done in response to a situation before they had dementia. Behavioral expressions are symptoms. They are forms of communication, and they are usually an expression of some type of an unmet need. Here we see some examples of common behavioral expressions that we'll observe in people who are living with dementia. Restlessness, anxiety or agitation, repetition, asking those questions over and over again. Shadowing, this is where a person really wants to be close by their care partner at all times. Depression or tearfulness, sadness, social withdrawal, aggression, paranoia or suspicious behavior, wandering, going in search of someone or something in a moment of confusion, disinhibition, saying things that are sort of inappropriate, potentially behaviors that look to be sexual in nature. This is what we will call disinhibition. Refusing other people's assistance, right? Just either verbally refusing or physically pushing away people who are trying to help. Sleep disturbance, being up in the middle of the night, thinking, again, in a moment of confusion that it's time to go to work or other things that need to be done. And then sundowning. Sundowning is a common behavior that we see in individuals who are living with dementia, where in the late afternoon, early evening hours of the day, as the sun is going down, we see more confusion, more restlessness, more agitation. So responding to behaviors, I just want to point out we're not talking about making the person stop doing these things. Again, they can't change what's happening in the brain. So what we do is we change the way that we respond. So we can start by trying to understand the behavior as a form of communication. Is this an expression of some type of an unmet physical or medical need? Is there something in the person's environment, or is there something going on emotionally that they need? So it's important that we look for and try to understand the triggers behind the behavior. Some common physical triggers, sort of daily normal types of pain. This could be the regular bodily aches and pains that we all feel throughout the day. It could be sitting in an uncomfortable chair, clothing that's too tight. It could be hunger. It could be thirst or the need to use the bathroom. Inadequate movement or activity will often be a trigger for behavior. Could there be something medical going on with this person? Very important to recognize that a very sudden change in a person's behavior that's very dramatic and occurs over a very short period of time is often and is usually a sign that something medical is going on with this person. Perhaps they have an infection, perhaps they are coming down sick, they may have had some type of a cardiovascular event, or this may be a change in their mental health status. This could be symptoms of depression or anxiety. There are many emotional triggers for behavior as well. Feeling fearful, confused, disoriented, feeling frustrated. I'm trying to do a task that I know I used to be able to do, and it's not working for some reason. Or feeling frustrated with my care partners who don't seem to be understanding what it is that I'm trying to communicate. Feelings of isolation or boredom, a lack of interaction, very common in people with dementia. And keep in mind that this can happen even to somebody who is quite loved and very well cared for. They may have company all day. They may have things to do, but if the conversations, if the activities are difficult for them to follow, if they don't stimulate them in the right ways, even a person who's not alone can feel isolated, alone, or bored. And finally, there's a category of environmental triggers too. Being in unfamiliar surroundings can trigger some of these behaviors that we've been talking about. And do keep in mind that an unfamiliar, or even a very familiar place can feel unfamiliar in a moment of confusion to a person who's living with dementia. Sensory overload, when that environment is too cluttered, when there's too much noise or too much activity. And finally, a very important trigger is us, right? If we, as the caregiver or the care partner to this person, if we are feeling stressed, if we're tired, if we're irritable and short-tempered, if we've got unfriendly expressions and body language or tone in our voice that communicates that we are under stress, they are often going to feel that as well, and that may trigger behavior. So our goal, if you look at the bottom of this graphic, our goal is always to redirect the person's attention, right, to some other topic of conversation or to some new activity. But we're not going to be successful if we haven't let the person feel seen and heard first, if we haven't engaged in validation. So we want to try to, once we have determined, is there something physically, medically, environmentally, or emotionally going on that I can address, we want to validate this person's experience, responding to them with calm, reassurance, communicating to them that we understand, that we have empathy for what's happening. The reality is we may not fully understand. We may try to recognize the behavior or the trigger for the behavior. We may not fully understand what is causing this person's behavior, what it is that they're trying to communicate. But if we can express that we know they need something, right? If we can respond to that feeling of frustration that we can detect, even if we can't figure out what's causing the frustration, often they're going to feel reassured. They're going to feel seen and heard. So now let's talk about that redirect. Where exactly do we want to redirect the person's attention? Let's come up with some ideas. Think back to your answers to this question from before. About those things about the person that you care for, what are those things that they can still do? Things that they enjoy now And remember what we said earlier about how sometimes the best way to communicate with someone has nothing to do with words. Think about the person that you care for and activities that might provide for helpful diversions during a time of agitation or restlessness, ways that we can connect with this person through the senses. So the sense of touch, maybe it's a favorite pet that they always respond to, a favorite soft blanket they like to have on their lap. When it comes to sight and vision, maybe it's an old movie that they love to watch, visual images they enjoy, photographs of special places, or a view from a window that they particularly enjoy. Think about smells that might be enjoying or calming. Right? Essential oils can be helpful. Food that's baking or simmering, that's a familiar and enjoyable smell for them. Taste, of course, food is a nice way of connecting. A favorite old recipe, or even just something like a soothing cup of tea. And the power of connection through sound is enormous, and there's many types of sounds that you might employ. It could be bird song outside of the window, or music. Using music is a very powerful way to connect with a person who's living with dementia. So ultimately, our goal here is redirecting, and we can think about these multi-sensory ways, these activities or smells or props that we can have in the person's space that help us in the process of redirecting. Remember, connecting and communicating with fewer words is often very helpful with a person with dementia. So using these other types of sensory input can be a very helpful way to redirect an unwanted or an unhelpful behavior. Finally, let's talk about some resources for ongoing support. I like to say that you can't pour from an empty cup. I do recognize that all of the strategies that we've been talking about so far in this program, they require a lot on the part of the care partner. You need to be creative. You need to be thinking on your feet. You need to be doing sort of on-the-spot problem solving all the time. And if you don't have anything in your cup to give to the person that you're caring for, you're not in a good position to do these things. So it is very important that you find ways to keep that cup full, right? Taking care of yourself with a healthy diet, adequate nutrition, making sure you're eating and drinking well throughout the day, getting plenty of exercise or just general movement throughout the day. Pay attention to your sleeping habits. We talked about sleep as a problem for many people who are living with dementia, and we do recognize if the person that you care for has sleep disturbance, then you probably have sleep disturbance as well. You may need some support to help you get better sleep, to manage stress, to have time for those social and intellectually engaging activities that keep your cup full. Don't focus only on the health care of the person that you care for who's living with dementia. If it's been a while since you've seen your own doctor, since you've checked your own blood pressure or gotten to the dentist, whatever those regular preventive healthcare tasks are, you need them for yourself as well. So in order to do all of these things, you're going to need a support system. Very important that we practice and learn how to ask for help when we need it. You probably have people in your life who've offered assistance. What can I do to help? And it can be hard to think of ways for people to help us, but I really encourage you to have a list ready. Think about some of those things you don't have time to do for yourself, and see if there are tasks that you can offload to other people. Stay connected to the people and the places and the things that you enjoy, those things that keep your cup full. Find a support and discussion group if you have not found one already. And you absolutely need respite. You need opportunities to take a break. Not just long vacations. Vacations from time to time are wonderful, but even just very simple, short daily breaks are critically important for care partners. So if you are in need of some additional ideas, some sources of support, if it all sounds well and good to improve your sleep and get a little more exercise, but you don't know how to find the time or how to find the people that can help you make that possible, that's what we're here for. So Alzheimer's San Diego is a local nonprofit. All of our programs and supportive services are provided at no cost. So you see here the range of support that is available from our local team of dementia care consultants, through our education program, through our support and discussion groups. We have social activities and outings for people with dementia and their care partners. We have a companion respite program and can connect you to other sources of community support. For respite, we can help you find local clinical trials related to Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia, as well as caregiver health. Above all else, our team of dementia experts are here to be a source of information, resources, and support. You can find a lot of good information and resources, videos on our website, www.alzsd.org. Reach out and talk with one of our dementia care consultants. You can call, you can email us, or you can connect with us via live chat through our website. And our office, which is in the Kearney Mesa area, has a lending library on site, free books and videos that you are welcome to peruse or check out and take home and learn from. And in addition to lots of in-person activities, classes, support groups, and other types of programming, you can also meet face-to-face with our social work team as well. So if you have any questions on the topic of communication, anything else about this program, or are in need of any other type of information or support, please get in touch and let us know how we can help. I thank you for your time.